All right, so I think there are a couple of interrelated things that I found really fascinating about the research that I'm doing right now on these communist women's organizations during the Cold War. So the first piece of that, specifically looking at Bulgaria and working in the Bulgarian archives and actually talking to the women who are still alive from that period of time, is that unlike the stereotype of these organizations as being completely ineffective or just sort of dupes of the Communist Party, they actually had power. It's just that, like kind of lobbyists behind the scene, they were politicking using established channels of power within the party. And so because they were integrated into that system, they were sort of able to, what I call, pester the Politburo into doing things for women and families that the Politburo and leaders in these countries may not otherwise have been willing to do, particularly when it came to spending money. There were a lot of programs, child care centers, and the payment of child allowances that required resources from the state that the state may not have been willing to spend, but these women made a very concerted argument that this was in order to incorporate women into the labor force and to really incorporate them fully as citizens in society, the state needed to see children as a social good. And eventually they convinced the state that this was the way to do it. And so in 1973, there was this incredible Politburo decision passed in Bulgaria, which extended all of these entitlements for Bulgarian women and Bulgarian families. The second part of that is that they sort of took that on the road. Once they had this decision domestically, I think that they were very influential, not only throughout the socialist bloc, but then very importantly in Africa and Asia. And there were these huge transnational networks of progressive women. Ghana and Tanzania, Zambia, Ethiopia had very, very close links, in some cases formal agreements with the Bulgarian Women's Organization that we've completely forgotten about, that have gone invisible. So there was an entire network of women in conjunction with the non-aligned movement that were interested in sort of more social ideas of motherhood and the idea that that socialism could provide an answer to women's problems in a way that took the power away from private employers and really said, look, the state has a role to play here in a really important way. And so that leads into the third thing, which I think is the importance of the Cold War in understanding how women's movements gained so much in such really relatively a short period of time. From the 60s onwards, there were huge gains for women around the world, and obviously beginning with the UN International Year for the Women in 1975, and then the UN Decade for Women, which went to 1985, and then ultimately to Beijing in 1995. I think that the Cold War and the tension between East and West, to the extent that the socialist bloc was mobilizing their networks of progressive women, they were putting pressure on Western countries to do things for women. And then when Western countries started doing things for women, that then in turn put pressure on the communist countries to do even more. So in some ways, the dialectic between East and West was really, really productive for women in a way that I think we haven't really recognized or discussed as much as we should.